David?
We go?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Good evening, everybody. This is the Enfield Planning Board. We are at the DPW facility and also on Microsoft Teams. Calling the meeting to order at 6:30. And members present from my left. Eric,
Russell.
Dan Kylie.
I'm David Frack.
Tim Jennings.
Nate Miller.
Craig Hotz, alternates. Bill Griffin, alternate.
Staff,
Rob Taylor, staff.
Whitney Banker, also alternate.
and on Teams, we have,
Linda Jones.
hi Linda.
Hello.
We can hear you. This is good. Okay. So let's get the meeting going. There are no hearings, no conceptuals, select board, Eric.
We had a pretty straightforward meeting on Monday, mostly around CIP expenditures and approving those expenditures. And then actually a sort of an interesting discussion on the town's been approached about having some food trucks at different places. So discussions around how to work that into our vendor policy.
Okay.
So yes.
Any questions or comments on the select board report? Okay, seeing none, we will go on to land use community development report.
Okay, I was just talking earlier, last night was a big zoning meeting, zoning board. We had three cases, land use cases. The first one we heard was Jim Kelleher, the Copeland block. As you guys remember, we did site plan for that, and he also needed the zoning board to grant a special exception for the multifamily use there. And so he did get that last night. We approved that. Fairly straightforward. There was a little bit of back and forth about sort of the transition away from being commercial, straight commercial to residential. And he's gonna try to phase it in without kicking people out that are still renting.
Mhm.
But I think we got that resolved. Second hearing was also Jim Kelleher. He's purchased that piece of land on Pillsbury Street that is on the river between the rail trail and the water. Lot formerly owned by Tim Taylor, formerly was the site of the lower Baltic Mill, where they spun yarn. And he had applied for two things. He applied for a special exception, also for multifamily, because it's CB. That was approved. He had applied for a variance for intrusion into setbacks with the Mascoma River. That was denied. So it's kind of back to the drawing board for him. I have not spoken with him since. I've tried to get in touch with him to see what his intentions are. Hoping that we can do some reworking on his plans to maybe try to squeeze it in there without the variance. But the ZBA seemed reluctant to grant the variance for the river setback intrusion. There was a little bit of, that's a historic former mill site, but I mean, it's just rubble at this point. So we'll see. We'll keep you up to date on that, but he's likely to either appeal it or revamp the design for another try. And then the third hearing was for the owners of Lovejoy Brook Self-Storage. Their last name is Aiken. It's two brothers that have sort of taken over from their father, Scott Aiken. As you guys know, they have several self-storage buildings down there, and they have since purchased the remaining land from Bob LaCroix, who had subdivided it off. It was originally all to be one site and one business there. But at some point, Bob subdivided off. So he had his warehouse for the classic cars, and he did a few auctions down there. And then sold off the storage buildings to the Aikens. They run several storage units around the state. They've got a big one in Salem. They've got a big one in Plainfield. They've got, I think, several in New London, Sunapee area. As you know, there seems to be limitless demand for those self-storage. I think that's maybe a side effect or a symptom of the housing crisis. People are underhoused, so they're storing lots of stuff, so those. And we've got a new one in Enfield at Jake's Car Wash. And then, of course, there's a big one that Bobby Oaks built right there at exit 17 in Lebanon. And I've seen several going up in like White River, Hartford. So there doesn't seem to be any slackening demand for those. We'll see. Couple of neat things. We will have an application at your next meeting 2 weeks from tonight for a conversion of a home on Maple Street into a multifamily housing for major site plan review. I'm not gonna name any names,
It's my
but
house.
Eric's got an application ready. We're doing the notices and the advertisements and all that stuff, so we'll be talking about that. Kind of excited about a couple of cool things happening. You guys familiar with Hale's Garage? Hale's a motorcycle mechanic. He's been there for a long time. Does a heck of a business, knows how to fix just about anything.
Where's it at?
Where's it?
That's
Across from
right
New Public.
between Enfield House of Pizza
Right.
and the Randy's Car Wash.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
The red
The
building.
red building,
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
That's Charlie Hale.
Charlie Hale. He's finally sort of, I think, reached his retirement, and he has now sold that property to a gentleman from up north who has a business that he's going to sort of replicate down here. He is a dealer for Bobcat. He's a
Mhm.
power equipment dealer. And he is also picking up some of the franchise that was at previously at Nexus 17, their DMB Power or whatever it was
Mhm.
called, formerly Rowell's. I think they were a Husqvarna supplier. So he's gonna sell Husqvarna, Toro, and Bobcat, full line of Bobcat. Actually, we use them as a supplier here because we have a Bobcat excavator, and so that little building, they're very impressed with that building and that site, and he's been in to see me. The business it's in Woodsville right now, called Woodsville Power Equipment.
Oh, yeah.
And it's right on Dartmouth College Highway up there, right near the Walmart in Woodsville.
Yep.
I think it's actually across the street. But he's been in to see us. He's very excited about working with us. He had some designs or intentions to go to Lebanon, but he actually kind of got cold feet with Lebanon. And so he's coming to Enfield, and I think he's very happy to be working with us. So he'll be before you in not too long for site plan review as well. Speaking of food trucks, the gentleman that owns the piece of property that was once Raphael's Kachina,
Mm-hmm.
he reached out to me on Monday of this week. He said he and his wife would like to possibly start a food truck site at that location. As you guys know, that site has some serious limitations with flood. We looked at it at one point for a public safety site, and it was not suitable because of the flood limitations. So I have instructed him that we're gonna go through site plan review for that. He is starting to reach out to some food trucks to see if there's interest. He hasn't quite gauged that yet, but we'll work with him and try to help him get up to speed.
Is that the same guy that, owned a mobile home park down in Charlestown or
Charlestown,
someplace?
Ian Vanier, yep. And his wife's name is Rochelle, they call her Shelley. They had, as you guys know, we talked to them several ideas there. They've been sort of, kind of playing their cards and seeing what might work and what might not. At one point, they were talking about being a mobile home dealer at that site,
Mhm.
right? Bringing in some trailers to be on display. And that might have also worked because they would have been up on blocks. The problem there is you gotta be ready if there's trouble with rain that need to be able to either withstand high water or get things out of the way for high water. Food trucks, I think, probably is actually not a bad use because you can move them. What was the question?
How does that become us? It's a mobile, it's a truck. It's,
I think
they're
that he
parking
has several
but
food trucks in there.
that's okay.
That we have
They're
done.
parking it on private property.
Well, if you guys think he doesn't need site plan,
Well,
I would
I
be
mean,
happy to
he
take.
needs the vendor thing from the select
We
board.
need the vendor permits. Well, that goes just through the town.
Right.
There's nothing permanent being
No,
constructed
Yeah, he's talking about some
there.
porta potties and
Yeah.
obviously it's traffic generation. I thought he needed site plan because we did do site plan for a food truck across the street.
Yeah,
Do you remember that?
oh, yeah,
Right, right, if it's using it as.
it's land,
Essentially, well, no, essentially a restaurant, it's just a building on wheels. Because if the trucks aren't just being, if they're not just being parked there overnight, if that's where his business is going to be. Then I see it as a,
is it,
As a
or
business.
is he renting to other trucks?
Oh, no, he's hoping to have 3 or 4
Right.
other trucks
Yeah.
right there.
So he's basically renting to other trucks to sit on their land.
but it's still gonna be
They're
operated
registered
as a
vehicles.
business. A restaurant business.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I
If they're
kinda
not-
think
they're
we
not-
ought to listen to what
Well,
he
we
has
can
to
listen
say.
to it, I just don't know.
would you like him to come in for conceptual?
Well, let's call him conceptual,
Yeah.
yeah.
Conceptual would be good.
Conceptual would be good,
Yeah,
yeah.
So we're not
Parked
quite
overnight, that's
convinced that site plan is
No,
necessary.
they're-
Well, I don't know, I
Say
don't know
they're
where our
two
jurisdiction is.
Yeah.
It's definitely all temporary. There's nothing permanent.
There's nothing permanent there,
Yes.
they can move every night.
And
Or
of
they can
course,
leave them overnight, cause it's private property.
absolutely. And we have had the discussions, starting with the select board,
Right.
about everything that's mobile has to be registered with the state. You know,
Right.
there's a food truck license.
right.
Right,
Their
Exactly.
vehicles have to be registered, either
Oh, yeah.
trucks or trailers have to be registered.
oh, yeah,
I'll
So
bet you he's gonna want a permanent sign.
it's also not a permanent year-round thing. He would only
Right.
be open in the summer, like May through September.
right,
So
so it's also a temporary
So
sign,
we have a.
That's true, too.
Hearing, and then based on what we hear
yeah,
Yeah,
and see,
But-
then we can decide, right?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
a conceptual. And then we could decide
Yeah.
whether or not we need to have a
a formal site
Full-
plan.
Yeah.
site plan,
okay, I will have him in first conceptual, maybe as soon as 2 weeks.
yeah,
Okay,
Otherwise, we're still busy with some plans for the summer. Obviously, we're gonna be talking to the regional planning. I did attend the regional planning's TAC committee, which is Transportation Advisory, which I'm a member of as Enfield's representative. We had a meeting yesterday at the Kilton Library to discuss TAP. It's kind of fun to get these acronyms, the TAC and the TAP. TAP stands for Transportation Alternatives Program. And we actually had an application, one of 3 that were before that committee scoring. The committee scores them and then sends them to DOT for further review and analysis. We were the 3rd in line after they reviewed the other 2. The highest scoring project was Lebanon City. They're looking to finally link up sidewalks coming from West Lebanon on Miracle Mile
mhm,
to sidewalks coming from Lebanon downtown in the Mechanic Street area. There's still a stretch there of about maybe a half mile that does not have any sidewalks. And I remember being in Lebanon as the chamber guy, and that was obviously a big goal to try to have it so you could walk all the way down. So that one scored fairly high because it has lots of destinations, there's bus stops and lots of businesses. Claremont had one that scored a little lower. They're doing some sidewalk improvements, which made them score a little less high because they're not necessarily building anything new. They just want to upgrade stuff. And then ours was the project that started as a scenic byway grant, which would come from the Shaker Bridge, Main Street intersection on 4A, headed down towards La Salette and the Shaker Ball Fields. That one scored lower because it's not really linking anything sort of vital. And there's no public transportation options on that road, as unfortunately as well. So, but they all 3 get advanced up to the state, and the state makes the final call on those as grant money available. And then I think I told you guys, we're hosting the New Hampshire Planners in early June, working on what's gonna be the program for that. We've got about 2 or 3 hours to sort of schedule and program. I'll keep you guys up to date on that. We're also working with the regional planning on a kind of a neat thing that's sort of facilitated by, I think it's the Sierra Club,
The Nature Conservancy.
Nature Conservancy. It's a sort of a resilience building exercise that was given blessings by the select board. It's no cost to us. It's kind of a neat exercise. It's by invitation, so we've developed, there'll be representatives of the select board, the planning board and so forth, where we try to get a nice cross section of business, nonprofit, and get, I think they're shooting for about 20 to 25 people in the room at once. And as I said, it's a facilitated kind of morning discussion And it's gonna be interesting to see how that comes out. I know Lebanon City did it and a few other communities in the area. And we've seen some of the products that have come out of those, really nice. So we'll keep you guys in the loop on that. And of course, we're gonna talk in just a minute about the rest of the stuff. So that's it for me, unless anybody has any.
Any questions for Rob?
Kurt,
And did Aiken get their variance?
it can get 6 variances.
Okay.
So that's, yeah, sorry. That is one. I had kind of told them months back that we were hoping to get rid of the Route 4 zone.
Right.
And they were encouraged by that. Obviously, it didn't come to fruition for one reason or another. So they went forward with the variance applications. And the ZBA really had no issues with anything because it was mostly common sense type stuff, you know, it was, Route 4 zone requires sidewalks. Well,
Mhm.
there's nobody gonna be walking down in front of the storage building.
You can't have a flat roof with Route 4.
Things just
Gotta
like
have
that.
pitched
There's 6
roof.
of them.
Yeah,
And we,
okay.
they actually put them all up here and they kind of went down through them and seemed to agree that they were all reasonable. As you guys know, self-storage is probably, as a commercial use, is the most mild in terms of traffic flow and business like that. Couple of cars a day, you know, and people pull up and pull in front of their unit, unload something or load something and they're gone. So, and we did also elect new chair and vice chair last night. As you guys know, there was a little bit of turnover. Madeline Johnson has left. She did not run for reelection. Mike Dean unfortunately didn't file in time. He ran a write-in campaign and was beat by Tim Lenahan, who's now one of the members. And we actually had a new member who's actually really great, is a local, lives right down the street from you. She's actually a person in the Lebanon Planning and Zoning Development Office named Tiffany. And it's kind of fun because she's actually a deputy zoning administrator for the city of Lebanon. So she brings a lot of nice experience and she was great last night. Our new chair is Dan Regan. And the vice chair elected last night is Bill Finker. And so Dan hit the ground running last night. I thought he ran a great meeting. I look forward to working with him. I've worked with him now extensively through many different avenues, so I think he'll be great. And they've got some neat stuff coming up next month then, so trying to get them some more training. You guys got all those emails that we sent, thanks to Nate reminding me, we sent out some emails to you guys and the zoning board for some opportunities for some trainings. I think there's a lunch and learn coming up with the Office of Planning and Development. And there's also the spring conference. It's a Saturday. It's there's like multiple tracks. It's planning board tracks, it's ZBA track. It's free, it's online. I do kind of miss the in-person because there was a lot of networking
Yeah,
there, but it's kind of classic state of New Hampshire. They just kind of, it's now exclusively online. And they will record it, so if you can't go on the day of, at your leisure, you'll be able to watch it back on YouTube, so
Will that be the same for the one on the 17th?
I think that is the one, right? Is that the one I sent you guys?
I think you said it's
I think that one's on, I want to say May 10th. Is that, does that ring
May
a bell?
10th. And there's another one on May 17th. It's just a lunch hour.
Yes, that's the lunch and learn.
Is
Yep, so
that
there's two.
report, will that also be recorded?
I believe so. I believe all those lunch and learns, they do record those and make them available on their YouTube channel. Yep. If you look in those emails, I know they're at the very bottom, they don't give you a huge thing. It's like a little tiny one-word link that says here or something. You have to click on it to get to their YouTube channel. That should be there. Thank you. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious on the CBA, the application for the apartments on the rail trail, Escoma River. Did he have plans for anything? Did he submit any kind of plans for that?
Yeah.
Do you have a copy? Can I
Yeah.
get a copy of that?
Yep.
I'll get it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for Rob?
That's it.
Next is legislative report. Legislature did not meet last week because we're all getting ready for the budget vote tomorrow. I think of interest is the fact that the Republican version of the budget is looking to increase all sorts of user fees. And included in that are fees that the state is gonna wanna collect for things like septic and subdivisions and not quite sure what else. But, we will see what happens tomorrow. Read about it in the paper. That's all I can say. Closer to home, a lot of people from Crystal Lake have reached out to me about the condition of the boat ramp there, and I have been in contact with a gentleman at the Fish and Game Department who is in charge of boat ramps and other stuff. And so far, I've got a commitment from him to move the schedule up significantly. Originally, they had planned on permitting in the fall and maybe getting the work done in spring of 26. And I think he's committed to getting it done by the end of this year. We'll see what happens in terms of when he gets the permit application in. And then, I will see what kind of turnaround time DES can do on the permitting. I've told them that the lake people seem to think that they have resources available to do the actual construction. And I have tried to make it clear that people want to get their boats in the water this summer. So we're trying to make that happen and get the bureaucracy to be reasonable. So that's about it for the legislative report. Next, let's do meetings of March 23rd. Are there any comments, questions, or corrections? Anybody have anything?
I
guess-
have a question. I couldn't get into that meeting, but I did watch it online. And the woman who was shown, uh, I didn't think she was Sandra Chenard unless there are two Sandra Chenards. I thought that she was, I thought she used a different first name.
Sandy?
Well, no, it's Sandy Chenard. I know that she was our postmaster for years.
That was her.
Pardon?
That was her. That was here.
Then there's more than one. Okay.
Okay, Nate, did you have a question? or
Yeah, I
comment?
just, I noticed where I asked about the status of the Enfield's 10-year plan project. Do we know what the status of Enfield's 10-year plan project is?
So that one, that was a different TAC meeting. We've
Yep.
done similar thing as I was just telling you about for TAP. And our project was the number one project coming out of the RPC and is now in the hands of DOT.
Right.
What they do with it, I think it's very highly likely to get dropped right in there because we've actually been talking to DOT reps and they've actually shown us legwork that they've done already on that. And as you know, there's substantial plans already in place that may happen in the next year or two for a significant stretch of Route 4 from the Lebanon line to about where Mickey's Gasano's location is.
Yeah.
Including a lot of improvements on Dry Bridge. Problem there is, as you know, there's $10 million worth of work to be done and there's $6 million in the budget for that specific set of things. But I think that the traffic circle at the Main Street intersection will be added to the 10-year plan. And it's gonna be a while. As you know, those 10-year plans end up being more like a 25-year plan. Just the way things keep kind of getting pushed off, but we've had lots of good discussions about that too. There's some complexity because of the presence of Hughes Park. And some of the money that we spent to build Hughes Park was, I think it might have been LWCF. where there's the 6C boundaries established.
Yeah.
It's like a permanent easement. So if you take something away, you have to create something to replace it with. And so right on the chopping block, as we've discussed it with DOT people, is that basketball court. Which, we think we've got that one on the run, because when we met with the DOT, we had already had some discussions with Mascoma Bank. Mascoma Bank was like, hey, we've got this land behind our building that we would certainly be willing to share for that purpose.
Yeah.
It's kind of linkage between Whitney Hall parking lot and Hughes Park baseball field. So I think that the possibility of that happening is
Or at
definitely.
least getting programmed in the 10-year plan. Yeah.
Exactly. When it happens. Some of us may.
Things go to the back of the line in the 10-year plan.
Exactly.
Back of the line in this next 10-year plan will either be 2035 or 2036, so.
Yeah, I'm really worried about that. Yeah.
Okay, anything else on the minutes? Somebody want to make a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
Do I hear a second? Seconded by Tim Jennings. We're on team, so we have to do a roll call. Linda,
Aye.
Eric Russell,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Tim,
I
Nate,
Aye.
who was,
I think Whitney was.
Whitney, were you there as a member?
Yep.
Filling in for me, probably. Okay, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I will abstain because I was not at the meeting. All right. Minutes are taken care of.
You could
Um,
appoint somebody for Phil's position.
are we
No,
gonna
we don't
take,
have any
are we gonna
votes.
take any
Probably not,
action?
probably not,
If we get to a point of having to vote on something, I will elevate somebody.
yeah.
Okay. You brought flowers. How
I did.
nice
I
are they?
That's so cool.
Softening.
Ah.
So,
Okay, Renee, the meeting is yours.
hello, everyone. Well, first, thank you again for having us. Happy to be here. And I want to introduce my colleague, Anna. She's here, and my other colleague, Grace, is on Teams. So they are joining in tonight to help kind of map out some of the event for the forum. So, yeah, sure. Let's see, I think, yeah, actually, I have one in here. Yep. So we had a great, very productive mini meeting. Rob, myself, Tim Jennings, and Dan Kiley was there as well, and David, to kind of touch base. That was on, gosh, when was that now? Sorry, my week there, last week.
Tuesday.
Last week. So I apologize. This has been a very busy week. But anyway, so very productive meeting. Tim Jennings came with a proposed kind of agenda, which is the first page of this. So Tim, I apologize if I wasn't sure. I think you had a copy that everyone may have already grabbed. And I think the only change that is on this 2-pager that we have here stapled together is that the out of that discussion, one of the things was the master plan move up. So that was the difference. But Tim, do you want to speak to any of this yet, or not yet?
well.
Or how, yeah.
Go through it?
Well, I guess, yeah, so we have the building reserved. I guess we can do a quick rundown of just kind of logistical. We have the building reserved,
Yep.
April 26th, 9 to 12. We have the media created, myself and Grace worked on that, so thank you again, Grace. And for the mailer, I'm not sure, did we know where
So
that
we had
stands?
some conversations.
Okay.
We're almost there.
Okay, all right,
And maybe we
Perfect.
should talk about that
Sure. later.
briefly after the meeting.
Sure, sounds good. So we have some media created, so we can also use that same imaging. I was thinking maybe pop it onto the master plan website and get that out, and then what other the other kind of outlets, or maybe print up some more too and just have them on poster boards around. I'm happy to pop around town and put them up as well. So advertising wise, I think we're in good shape. I've talked to a few residents in Enfield too already, just through some of my connections and mentioned it off the bat a little bit, and they're really excited. So hopefully we'll have at least a couple people in attendance so far. And then logistics wise, the building, the time is set, media collateral is going, and staffing from our side. I will be in attendance. Anna will be in attendance, and I believe we're gonna try to have Grace in attendance as well for facilitating. And potentially one more person, if we can. We're gonna take a look at the hours and budget. But trying to help to facilitate the event.
Awesome.
That's kind of it. And then as, I guess rolling into kind of, so we know the community building. Our team has met a couple times now just to kind of run through where we're at and brainstorm sessions. And one of the things that came up is how do we want the environment to be kind of when they walk in, right? I know we had talked about some visuals as people walk in, some light refreshments, those kind of things. Another thing, hence the visual display too, is maybe doing the style of seating and using tables. They have tables
Lots of
there, right?
tables,
And
lots.
chairs, perfect. And utilizing to kind of soften it and be welcoming, inviting tablecloths and some flower arrangements that are, greenery on the tables. Just a welcoming environment again, maybe not quite so, what's that word again? Classroom, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Sterile and structured and just kind of make it more comfortable for folks as they come in. Yes. So, and Anna has gone through some facilitator training as well. And so that's where we're bringing her in as well to help with some of that and give us more ideas. Just again on the kind of environment and questions to pose and how to engage and elicit that feedback that we're looking for. So that's kind of the rundown of the gist of the time for that 26th in the morning of the event. And again, we've identified some maps to create, and Grace is going to be helping with that over the next week or so, getting those prepared and ready. And maps up on the walls. And then we've also chatted about, an icebreaker in the beginning, and we can touch on that too on the agenda side of things, kind of timeline. So 9 to 12, as a reminder again, is kind of our timeline on this. And yeah. So Tim at our last meeting had graciously kind of I had put together some notes, and he came as well with an agenda. And so we kind of bounced right off of that, and yeah, off to the races.
Yeah, I think the idea is that, of course, you can see here that members of the planning board take a portion of the introduction to this whole thing and do a spiel, and get some bullet points here, but I think the idea is that, like Dan, for instance, you don't need to follow this necessarily.
No,
Just come up with your own.
5-minute history of the master plan. And
Yeah, and of course, it'd be I don't know, is this icebreaker thing gonna happen before all this?
Yeah, probably. Yep. To kind of, so like, pull up my other timeline. So yeah, 9 to 9:15, kind of people arrive, they cycle in, they're getting their refreshments and drinks, and have like an icebreaker in the beginning, a quick introduction, an icebreaker. And then another thing that we had discussed too on the agenda for items was, after the icebreaker about 9:10, 9:15, group rules. And I think we had mentioned that, I remember mentioned at the last planning board meeting. But sometimes it's great to establish some kind of group rule, some agreement amongst everyone participating, and help them kind of, we can also ask for feedback too. We can have some standard ones on the board and ask if there are others, be respectful, be kind, listen while everyone's talking.
there's no bad ideas.
Right, yeah, there's no bad ideas, like we're, brainstorming here, that visioning, so kind of that vision process and brainstorming of focusing in, will definitely be a great time. So really having people be a part of it and welcoming, and so kind of setting up those kind of group agreements, if you will. And, you know, if there are times when, probably more in the second phase as we go through this, you'll see, that, you know, the not interrupting people, things like that. So just everyone feels like they can be a part of it. And then going into the introductions and the master plan. And I think one of the things, that came out of our meeting, which was really helpful, and we brainstormed as well, staff wise, as, you know, reminding them and really that master plan is what's the catalyst to what we're doing that day of the event, and reminding folks, you know, I know hearing from you all the last couple meetings like that, you've done a lot of work and a lot of legwork, you've done a lot of questioning, you've done a lot of visioning and asking, and so now it's like we're taking this, what, you know, where is this coming from, what's the catalyst for it, and that's really it. So we definitely want to start with that for the forefront. Yeah.
Somebody's got a question online.
Yes.
Linda, you got a question?
Yes, I do. Is this being called a workshop so that people understand that they're expected to stay 3 hours? Or are you expecting people who are just going to drop in for 15 minutes and see what's happening?
Great question. It's being advertised as a forum. Typically in forums, it's known that there's an engagement factor. So we hope that people know that they can stay. If they need to leave off early, we will actually, part of the setup with the tables, if someone does need to leave halfway through, I think some of our ideas for capturing information the people will still be able to provide their feedback or be a part of the process if they have to leave early.
It wasn't the leaving early, it was the fact that someone said, yeah, when they get the mail sorted, maybe I'll go down and check out what they're doing. I think you should put in a little word somewhere like starting at, or I don't know, can't think what it would be, to let them know you'd like them there at the beginning. We've had a couple other things, and I'm glad you're kind of thinking about the atmosphere and what's going to happen, because there've been a couple in the last couple of years where people kind of didn't know what was going on, what they were coming for. I mean, they knew the larger subject, but I just think they need a little help knowing what this is.
It's a good point, because we went to one of the other forums and you could basically, if it went for 2 or 3 hours, you could come in at any point and engage and stay there for an hour or 15 minutes, what you felt comfortable with, and then leave.
So maybe on the web page, which the mailer has the website on it and the QR code to link it to the website, maybe on there we give a brief rundown of the agenda so that folks can see, like 9, you know, just
Basically, this
just a,
cover sheet.
Yeah.
Your bylines
mhm,
and. or
to
just-
do a quick rundown of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the
There's
website.
still time to add a couple of words on the mailer too, that would indicate that it's a 3-hour exercise.
Okay, so maybe just on the,
And not a drop-in.
right. Maybe on the back, where it's on the back side, where is what we have,
You could actually just make it clear the agenda is here,
Right.
and then.
But-
people can
yeah.
look at the
Yeah.
agenda.
that's another
Yeah,
thing on the
right.
back where it says like, for more information, maybe we say
I'd be explicit.
Agenda.
Right,
agenda.
because
Yeah,
then that tells people there's a schedule.
there's a flow.
If they
okay.
wanna know the schedule, they look at the agenda.
Right, but you want to
That's a very
change,
good point. That's good.
you want to change the word on to workshop? Linda brought.
I don't think the public would care which word you use, but if you say it starts at this time and then leave these other times open,
Mhm,
so people don't think, oh, if I come at 10 PM or 10 AM, this will be starting.
mhm.
It's may not be, probably won't be following that type of a schedule.
Right, right. Right, yeah, probably not a tight schedule, but at least like I think to your point, at least a rundown of
Yeah.
kind of the loose
Yeah, we're not
agenda.
putting like time starts like
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
The doors open at this time
Yeah.
And this is what we're gonna be discussing.
Okay, so on the website, do you have any thoughts to that?
Maybe you could say, arrival 8:45, presentation starts 9. So then people are settling in before it starts.
If you say arrival 8:45, coffee and donuts or something,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
it's gonna bring people.
Okay, so that. And that we think is probably good to have on the, what I'm, to make sure saying, on the website, when people folks go to look. Maybe we change, like, add the one wording of, check out the agenda here on the flyer or the postcard.
Yep.
And then when they go to look, they'll see that, settle, come in, arrival 8:45 and presentation to begin 9. Okay. So we'll have the verbiage for the website.
Sharon,
People get their information in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And this is great. I think your idea of a mailer is fantastic. But there will be people who lose that mailer, who don't really, who need to look at it and look up stuff and just look.
Yeah.
And that day comes and it's like, oh, there's lots of cards there. But we have a person who's been writing for the Valley News, lots of articles about Enfield, a woman, I can't remember her name now.
Liz South Shelton.
Yeah, I've talked to her a couple times. Yeah, yep.
Could somebody write
Liz.
something up for to get Liz to put
Sure.
in the paper a week ahead? Enfield plans, community forum on, so that people are informed of this, oh, this
Yeah.
is what it is. Oh, yeah, I got a mailer about that, so it gets a little bit more.
excellent suggestion, thank you.
I would think you do the mailer at least 2, if
Yeah.
not 3 listserv postings, at least 2. You need one a couple of weeks out and then one, a day or 2 before.
Yeah.
As a reminder, listserv postings, posting on the town website, the town website calendar. Any town social media accounts, Facebook in particular, but any town social media account should plug it. A press release would be good if if it prompts a story. They may do nothing with a press release, or maybe they'll write a story, or who knows, or maybe they'll have somebody there to hear feedback, but it doesn't hurt. But I think, as Sharon was saying, many different avenues of getting the word out, and those seem to be the most common and or effective ones here in Enfield.
I also was thinking the school, like we're printing a few of these overs, I believe, hopefully, or we can print up them to, papers and flyers and half sheet them and cut them. I was thinking the school might be a good connection as well. If anyone has contacts or thoughts on that, sharing out with them and getting it up.
They have a bulletin board in their lobby that they could probably put it on.
Okay.
The library or like the town clerk's lobby.
Would you have a flyer for the bank? They have a bulletin board.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Can we kind of walk through the flow of this agenda and see how?
Yep.
Because I could follow it up to a certain point and then I sort of lose it a little bit. So
Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
the introduction pieces all make sense. So you start with the master plan. I think that's obvious. That's
the guiding document.
these bullet points. I know they're not, intended to be requirements, but they're all good bullet points and good stuff to hit in those various presentations. So I think, to the extent possible, those who are presenting should try to hit all of those bullet points, because it does help tell the story and set the stage. So Dan is going to talk about the master plan, and you know, these bullet points underneath it. And then Dave is going to talk about why are we rewriting the zoning ordinance? I would tend to think, why are we rewriting the zoning ordinance? The first thing you're gonna say, it's not on here, but to implement the master plan. This is the way that we, you know,
Right.
we are, you know, to implement the master plan. So these kind of, you know, you set the stage with the master plan, and now
Right.
here we're working on zoning ordinance to implement what the master plan's vision is.
Are you guys, gonna rewrite this based on what we hear tonight?
Yes, yeah, we can take notes and rewrite. Yeah, we can draft it. Yep, I can.
And then, you know, hit these different bullet points about the, you know, various aspects of the zoning ordinance. And then, you know, that last bullet point, HOP grant and RPC assistance, you could probably dovetail that a little bit into, you know, one of the reasons why we are rewriting the zoning ordinance. You know, we're implementing the master plan, but we're also, you know, as the master plan identifies, and as we know, there is a housing shortage in the town and in the region. And that's the final bullet point here. It's not written in that exact language, but that dovetails
Yeah,
into
it
the next
flows, it
piece,
flows.
right? That dovetails into the next piece where we, you know, hear about the housing issues that are happening in the town and in the region. And from there, it looks like Eric will talk about the proposed village district, downtown business, and Route 4 district boundaries, the reasoning behind our preliminary boundaries. And I think, you know,
Just stare at the map and.
yeah,
This is what we.
but also like, you know,
Yeah.
yes, that needs to be done. You know, obviously done in a way that's like, hey, this isn't final. We're here tonight for you to tell us if you think we're on the right track or the
Yeah.
wrong track here, you know, kind of set the stage for, you know, because that really becomes part two,
Right.
you know, or the core of part two of this agenda is people telling us what they want to see there and what their, you know, what the vision is and if we're on the right track or not with, you know, some of these initial thoughts.
So that brings up a question about Eric's showing the boundaries. Do we want to, at that point, get in a long, lengthy conversation about what the boundaries should or shouldn't be? Or do we hold that off till later?
I tend to think that comes in part two.
Yeah, I do.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, I think the criteria that you and Eric used for drawing the boundaries that you drew, which are lots that have water and or sewer. And let's just put it out there, that's our starting premise. And we can be flexible, we can change it, but this is what we thought was a good place to start. Because you've got a HOP grant, which is for housing, and lots that have water and sewer or can be easily connected to at least sewer, are the most likely to be able to be developed for housing.
Well, then more higher density housing.
right, because that's what your master plan said. Is
Yeah.
water and sewer is where we're looking at more housing because of the availability of that. It becomes the master plan said that the village district is where the housing is most likely going to happen.
Yeah.
Thing is, just saying housing, you can have a housing development on Bog Road. That's housing.
Right,
Right,
But we're not gonna get the same kind of density.
that's right,
right.
right.
So
So,
we've already talked, Dave will point out how in writing the master plan, we're not gonna deal with Bog Road or the.
no,
I
the
know.
thing is, when, as a member of the public, and I'm hearing you talk about, that's where we're gonna have housing. Because there's water sewer there. It sort of makes the implication that without water sewer, you can't have housing.
No,
No.
I agree.
Without water sewer, you can't have housing density.
You can't have housing density, right? I agree.
That's the,
Emphasis on
that's
the
the,
density.
right,
Right.
right. That is the difference between having just housing and housing density
Right,
on the same amount of land.
right.
Yeah. Do we wanna tie that concept back to the HOP grant, which told us focus in.
Well, I think the criteria for the HOP grant's kind of a minor issue, and the fact that maybe all you need to say about it is it's money to help facilitate, buy these guys expertise, and there we go. The, and Dan, when Dan's talking about the master plan, the excerpts from the master plan in some form need to be really handy to the participants.
Yeah.
And as a handout laying on the table, maybe.
Yeah, so we had talked about, what come last meeting was kind of an idea too of like a packet of handout or some pages on the tables. I think we'll have those probably on the tables. That way people can grab their drinks and refreshment, not have too much in their hands, and take them with them. Yeah, at the end, absolutely. And, I think, we talked too about the keys to the valley, right? And that visioning process. And so actually part of the, part two, I think will flow really well, because everything I'm hearing you guys kind of talking about now is that whole, it's the density, but it's also like the what does it look like, right? Like what's the before potential, this is today existing, and here's what could be with this infill.
That's part.
And I think that, yes, that's part two, but just to get your mind around like that, that's where that'll kind of come into, play.
So Eric is gonna introduce the polygon and our thoughts about
Why we drew this polygon.
how we drew it and why, and here's, what we think, comprises the different, the three different kind of distinct areas. Tim will follow up with that with some data largely about, it looks like existing conditions, so to speak, of the polygon, right? Here's what's going on today. Here's the estimated population, number of single family homes, number of multifamily homes, and where those are located. Map of existing quarter and under acre lots. And then a couple of these bullet points might be a little bit forward thinking about, potential sewer extensions and the like that may or may not be coming, but mostly that is.
I wouldn't use the word likely. I don't think anything's likely.
Yeah.
Potential.
And maybe you frame that just on existing conditions today and focus just on existing conditions.
Yeah, probably.
What's going on in the polygon today, right?
Well, we have a big screen that we can present on.
There's a projector.
Yeah, I'm bringing the projector and a very big screen.
Okay, yep, because I can bring a big TV if we need.
I think I should also.
We have one that we travel with. Cool.
Another bullet point would be to, and it is really pretty simple, but these are the existing zoning, requirements, restrictions that we're currently at.
Right.
A quarter acre lot, what does that mean? Well, that means you can only have one housing unit for each quarter acre lot, if you subdivide. But what else? Well, there's a couple other things I can throw in there. One building on one lot, that's still in there. Yeah.
So at the conclusion of Tim's overview of the existing conditions and kind of the data today of the polygon, at that point, we've set the stage, right? We've set the stage. And by my calculation, if we do, 10 to 15 minutes of welcoming and an icebreaker and people get situated and we go through this, that probably puts us right around 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
By the time we are going into part two, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then part two is a little less defined as to how we're gonna structure it. I mean, there's so the table, well, yeah, I mean, we'll have to give them some guidance.
Yes.
This looks like we're doing and maybe this is fine. We've got the tables around the room sort of thing, and there's, 8 people at each table, and we're gonna facilitate small group discussions within the table and report back to the bigger group, and there's usually a report back from each table at the end of that type of process. That's kind of standard, community forum type, we could do that.
We'll caution you that when you get like 4 or 5 tables having a discussion in that room,
Mhm.
it is a cacophony of
Yeah.
noise. Maybe they have to go downstairs and there's some other breakout rooms down there, I think.
Good.
Yes, one. Sorry.
So you got a couple of choices with the small group table type setup. Do you let people migrate to their own tables? Or do you randomly assign them somehow? They get a name tag and yours is green and mine is blue and Dan's is purple and I'm gonna go to the purple table or, and I'm gonna go to the blue table. Sometimes if people left to their own devices, it becomes cliquish. People sit with their friends and neighbors, they all have the same opinion. You don't get an exchange of ideas and you don't talk to people you don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
well, they're going to get this, right, for something like this.
So I would just say you could devise a way to assign people to a table randomly.
You just put a
Name
red,
tag.
a red,
Yeah.
a blue, a green
Mhm.
star on there.
Yeah.
You're on the red table, you're on the green table, you're on.
And then you kind of force people to mingle a little bit.
Yeah.
And have conversations with people that they may not normally have conversations with, or that may have different ideas than.
Right, yeah.
Kind of open, expand people's horizons that way.
Yeah,
So that's one thing to think about.
Yeah.
So we're at 10 o'clock. We're now at these tables. And we're starting the visioning process.
Well, I think before that, we would, have a break
Okay.
in between. And then as people come back, we'll give a quick overview as our kind of our brainstorming so far is the keys to the valley, right? To get people kind of that visual. And we had mentioned previously about talking about, do we use Enfield pictures as an idea or do we just use the keys to the valley? And I think, using the Chester and the Wilder images that are on the website. So we'll pull that up to the screen and showcase that and talk about that a little bit. And just get kind of the ideas flowing and get people thinking, right? Because it's really hard sometimes too to break that barrier of like this, but that's Joan's house right there. I don't want anything to change there. And so just to kind of get the ideas flowing. And so we'll showcase that first and then break out to the tables.
So the first thing in part 2,
It's not in order, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that this is not quite finished. Yes, correct. And that part of it is also, I was wondering, we were hoping to have a couple of bullet points from you all on the uses, right? We had talked about that. Do we have any of that tonight or in the next like maybe 3 days, 4 days?
Mhm.
Have anything from folks on that? Okay, that would be awesome. That'll help some of the tips.
We're explain that a little bit further.
I guess like came out a couple of meetings ago. I think maybe it was you, Dan. Someone had to ask the meeting about within each of these boundaries, what are like 2 or 3 things? There was 5, actually, I think it was actually 5 bullet points for each proposed new zone from each board member. Like, what is your thoughts on the proposal of the new zone? 5 bullet points of each one. And that will help us too, to make sure that we are asking the right questions at the tables. We're posing kind of that, eliciting the correct, trying to garner back for you all. Does that make sense? That was one of the questions that come up like maybe 2 meetings ago. Was a couple of bullet points for each proposed new zone from each member. Like
Are you looking specifically for uses or for other sort of zoning requirements? Like,
I think it could be all the above.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything you have in mind that, as you talk to.
I sent you a list just off the top of my head in response to your email, but that was more about the, uses. I had interpreted your email of what do you think the uses would be in the village district, which I interpreted to be not the downtown or the Route 4 area, but the
greater.
the rest of the
village.
polygon.
Yeah.
So I gave Rob some ideas about,
Okay.
you know, but that doesn't mean those are perfect or anything.
Oh, no. It's just more like for us to be able to see some things of what you all have been working on when you were drafting this too, so that we can kind of catch up to speed, so to speak, on, you know, you guys have been working on this, you drafted that, but we maybe weren't as much a part of that as to, the lines. And while it was like the water sewer is a good call out, like that was kind of why, where the boundaries landed. But then what are your all's vision too for it, right? Like, you guys are residents here too, and so, getting that, so that way we can have it in the mix too, in the plan. For what your thoughts are, and also, I think another thing, I thought of earlier today too, was that you all know what is coming before the board for this area too, right? And then maybe also like the updates from the zoning board, and so are there a lot of variances that we're seeing in this area? And you know, what does that show us? Are there a lot of special exceptions being asked? What does that show us? So anything to do with that area too, on your more technical side, would be really helpful for
Well,
us.
that might be good to put in the, as part of my presentation. Maybe you and I could tag team there.
Yeah. I mean, when you have to go and get a special exception or a variance in order to have a multifamily, then what is a village district?
Mhm.
That's an issue.
And maybe like how many in the last,
For the Copeland
10
block, they
years
have
have
to
there
go
been?
CB.
in the,
Yeah, ridiculous.
and get a special exception.
But the R1, it's not required.
The R1 is not required.
But
Right,
the site, a major site plan is,
right, exactly. Yeah,
that's a use question.
Yep.
Not a
right.
site question.
So it's a use question. Exactly.
So kind of highlighting the hindrances to people building housing downtown.
Right.
You want to work on the,
Sharon's got a bullet question.
What do you see as the work product of each table? What are they going to
Yeah.
finish with?
Exactly. What are the tables gonna do?
Mhm.
How are they gonna do it? And what are we presenting back?
How we're
to the
gonna bring-
group?
Yeah, and I almost work backwards on that, because like, what questions you asked, are they completing a template of possible zoning options?
I think that's one option for
Or
sure,
are they,
yeah.
what is the work product? I think it's really important before we even figure out what questions to ask.
Right.
well, I have,
If you make some tables to certain things and we don't do the colors on the papers of telling them where to go, but we have the tables highlighted as something, people will tend to go to the table that they feel is most going to impact them. Or, what they're more interested in.
For all the tables being asked the same questions.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the thought two question came up with us on our brainstorming kind of is, do they stay at the same table? Or is it like a 8-minute exercise and you
that-
rotate?
You
That
move to
very
the
well
next
could be, you
table.
could do a different, you could have a downtown table, a
Yep.
Route 4 table,
Village.
a rural, more rural village district table.
Right.
And, a visual preference table or something else, and every 10 minutes rotate
Mhm.
Right.
and try to hit all the tables over the
tables,
course
right.
of.
your group would move from.
Yeah,
Table to
group.
table.
Right.
and the facilitator, the Route 4 tables, only, they're gonna have a map of Route 4 on the table, and
Right.
you're gonna ask questions specific to Route 4. And
Right.
hear what people have to say about
Yeah,
that.
so you're gonna have a table that's water, no sewer.
Mhm.
What do
Yeah.
you wanna see there?
Actually, leave the people there and just move the idea from table to table even.
Yeah, but the paperwork, the
Yeah, the
map, stuff
paperwork.
on the table.
Yeah, and the-
Because they can also make their notes right there at that
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
It moves on, it
Yeah.
moves rather than it moving. It stays, the ideas
Yeah.
stay there, the next
Right,
group
yeah,
comes, they
yeah,
come in,
yeah.
with their ideas.
X amount of minutes per table and
Yeah.
then time's up,
Yeah,
everybody shifts.
and that's gonna be about an hour.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because if we have 5 tables at 10 minutes apiece, plus the amount of time it takes to go from table to table, that's your second hour,
And each table either has a regional planning commission staff person or a member of the.
or a member of the board.
Mhm.
Facilitated.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. Sharon had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I think you have to have a way of linking what you all know is current regulations for the areas that you want people to be thinking about and talking about. And because people don't know, and especially there've been changes lately. So to me, before I can envision what I want, I think some of the areas with the new zoning aren't being utilized as much as they can. Do people really realize what it's capable on their own property or in their own zone? And I think what would be most helpful for me, I'm a very visual person. And I think at one of the previous forums you had, there were some big sheets on the wall. So, okay, current zoning for residential 1, current zoning for whatever district it is that you're calling it now. So that as people are talking, they could go back and say, oh, well, that's already allowed, or I like that, but I'm not sure about this. It just gives them some scope. They can be more.
I wonder if we might do a handout on that so people have something to take home with them and they can think.
A handout that you take away from the meeting.
Yeah,
The only thing is, that's one thing I like about just something plastered on the wall, is if I'm at a committee table, I can look up and be like, oh, that's what it is. If I have a handout, I have to be like, oh, where's the page in my handout?
yeah.
So unless you want to do both, right? But there's some way of giving them information about this is what zoning currently is in these regions. So they have a solid foundation. And then you're all on the level playing field of what you know and what they know.
Which if you've got 4 corners to the room, if you put the poster right over that table, because people are gonna move from table to table, they're going to see what it is today on the table that they're working at.
Yeah.
And then you can get comments to that, and that drives comments, and that drives ideas. You know, cause it's different in the commercial on Route 4 than it is in the downtown village district. It's different in the water, no sewer. It's different in the water and sewer. So if you've got a good sized poster on the board by the table, then it just moves. You move from table to table, you can see what it is today and what do you like and what would you like to see change? And how would you like to see it change? Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, and I think that the map is a great idea of the current, what currently exists today and showcasing it. And I think we can showcase that, like we can take, take the, your map of your town and kind of blow it up and hit a parcel within that zone, right? And say, okay, let's see this parcel here, like, here's where your boundaries are, here's your setbacks, here's your front, here's everything outlined and highlighted and kind of color coded, if you will. Or maybe sometimes too, what we've done is, especially on the future side, is have them draw it out. Have a couple of sheets of a blank parcel, kind of a mock of, maybe don't, say where it is, but a couple of parcels, and be like, what could you envision here? How would you, if you had, maybe for like the housing and kind of the creative side of things, getting people engaged, like, they did it, the Hanover, one of their hot ones was they had a, kind of like a game board pieces, if you will. And like, you have all these pieces and you're like, okay, here's today's current. How do you fit 1, 2, 3 things on here? How do you fit these 3? How do you fit this business and these 2, apartment units? Or how do you fit this kind of structure on here on today? And then how could you change that? And, what would you mind seeing? And then they don't really, folks aren't really gonna, maybe not everyone's gonna understand maybe the regulation, the technical terms, right? So it's just like, okay, here's, that same parcel, what could you envision? Oh, I'd be happy if it was, 2 units behind here and you have a retail shop here and you have a couple of units up top. And so all of a sudden you created this, 5 unit with a retail business, and it's just what they see and what they're, comfortable seeing, right? And then we take it.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
You
And
take and do the same 2 parcels, but you move it to the 5 different districts. They're the same 2
Good.
parcels, but they're in 5 different places. what do you envision seeing there? Because it's
Along
now
Route
in the
4.
commercial district as opposed to in the downtown district.
Mhm,
What do you envision there?
mhm,
They're the same two parcels,
mhm.
they've just moved from place to place.
Just, yeah, yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
That's one idea that we've seen utilized and used to kind of
yeah,
get folks involved in the process and what they're, yeah, exactly what they're comfortable seeing. So,
So are we gravitating towards the rotating tables of topic areas?
I think so.
Seem to be
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
direction.
and it also kind of like gets people up and moving a little bit
Right.
and
yeah.
sometimes a 3-hour chunk of time can be a lot. So,
Yeah.
and did you have anything on
Right.
that? I know you-
What are the topic areas? Is it just 3? Is it just downtown, Route 4 and Village District? Or do we want to have other things that we, you know, or structured a completely different way, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
you could, what about a table where we talk about things like building heights, setbacks, sort of the
Dimensional.
stuff,
Dimensional tables.
Yeah,
aesthetics.
Yeah,
aesthetics.
Aesthetics.
Yeah.
I
I
think,
mean, all
yeah,
in one table, right? So you can just talk
Right.
about that stuff.
But wouldn't those, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
wouldn't those aesthetics vary?
from
For
place
me,
to
those
place.
aesthetics would vary a lot depending on those areas. So in a sense, that's part of vision this here, vision in these
Yeah.
different districts.
I agree. I tend to think, you know, I think about downtown and I think of more, you know, historic, you know, more sort of dimensional relief potential, historic, you know, mimicking the historic nature of the area. Route 4 to the east
Route
is a
4 is-
completely different animal.
Yeah.
And what might, you know, be appropriate aesthetic measures on Route 4 to the east of downtown, you know, be very, very different.
Okay, so not a separate table for that.
Right.
Sprinkle that information around the other.
You could.
I mean, Route 4 to the east is almost like an empty palette. What the hell do you want it to look like? Because you know you don't want it to look like it does today.
Well, but back
But you
in
can't do anything about it.
2012, they wanted it to have pitch roofs with fenestration.
I know.
Like New England. And now we're away from that, so I don't know. you know.
You could have a lively discussion about the western side of that too.
Oh, yeah.
Can I back up the discussion for just a second? I think we've decided on the groups rotating to different tables.
Yeah.
But have we settled on how the initial table is constituted? Do we let people self-select or do we do the color-coded thing? You go to the green table and you go to the red table.
I think we do that.
Yeah.
And so
I'd
sometimes
vote for
name
that.
tag.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
when people come in too, I think that, Anna had a good call out was to have name tags.
Mhm.
So everyone can,
Name
you
tags.
know,
and
Yeah.
and then
color star.
put different color stars or sticky dot on it. And then,
Right.
you know, they won't know at first, but then as we go through and we're like, okay, so now after break,
Yeah, but
those
now
colored
Sharon
dots.
knows.
I know. I know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I said, now Sharon knows the keys.
I think your idea is
I think
That's
great.
great.
That's what you gotta, I mean,
And
you
it
gotta have
breaks
a
it up.
great cross
I'm not
section,
gonna tell anybody.
right? You gotta have a great cross section.
We're gonna swear you to secrecy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a good
All right,
mix up.
we have no idea how many people are gonna show up.
Right.
How do we account for, do we account for multiple tables with the same topic? Or, you know, how are we going to?
When you're using the rectangular tables that are
right.
down there that hold
And we got enough
50
chairs,
plus people, side by side.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do two sides.
Yeah,
right?
So,
Well,
Yeah.
if we have 50 or 60 people there, we're definitely gonna need to get them away from one another.
That's what, yeah,
You're not be able to hear yourself think.
it's the four corners, yeah.
Yeah.
Plus one
Everybody
downstairs.
Downstairs.
It's
I
nice
think-
outside, you could go outside.
That's true.
There is the pavilion
Exactly.
across the park. But then
And
you
you
got
got-
handicap issues, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
and
you're gonna lose a lot of time
Switching people around.
going between. As opposed to if you keep, yeah, you may not be able to keep all 5 in that same spot, but So if you can pull one downstairs, that gives people at least 2 or 3 minute break getting downstairs where they can stretch their legs.
Mhm.
So
So,
house rules are to speak softly, right?
Yes, we can do, yeah, that can definitely be one. actually.
And carry a big stick.
And it's not a real big issue for the 8 people at the same table. It becomes a big issue when you're trying to talk to 50 people in there.
so if each table has around 6 to 8 people, how many tables could you fit in that space? And it would be a comfortable volume?
So,
There's no such thing as a comfortable volume in that.
No,
in
but
that room.
you could have 6 tables there.
You can fit lots of people in the space,
Right,
Yeah.
but yeah, as a comfortable volume, yeah, that's a different animal.
and if we get 50 people there, we're gonna be real happy, I think.
So,
Yeah.
let's go down this kind of rabbit hole for a second.
Yeah.
We haven't really decided, have we decided it's just 3 for the 3 different things, or are we thinking about 4 or 5 different subject tables? I don't know yet. Let's say it's 3 for the purpose of just going down the rabbit hole.
I mean, the core village, expanded village.
Downtown Route 4
Yeah,
and
and
the
then,
village,
mimicking the map that,
yeah,
Right, the map that we
3
drew
aspects
at
of the
three.
polygon.
yeah, I don't have my
Yeah.
copy of what we drew up.
So let's say it's those 3. We've got a table for each of those. And let's say 50 people come. That's 15 plus at each table. If we only had
Well-
3 tables set up, we might need to plan on 2 tables for each.
Yeah,
We might.
yeah.
And then if we get a lower turnout, then we just consolidate into 3 tables. But we might need to plan on 6 tables,
Let's-
2 for each.
We can do 2 tables, put it together and have copies on facing.
Right, let's add a
Facing
4th
it.
one. Route 4 West. Route 4 East and Route 4 West are very different.
What's the dividing line?
Let's make it the Enfield Middle School. Oh, we could make it Jake's, the
Well,
Enfield,
no, we-
because the village will go there. But from,
Well, the way we
From-
designed the polygon,
yeah,
the Route 4 West and East are separated by the downtown.
okay, then that makes the 4th one then.
and the east, sorry, the west is only a few lots.
Yep,
actually.
it's only a few.
Rather than push 2 tables together to accommodate 20 people, what if we had 2 groups of 10 working on the same project?
Yeah,
Right,
that's
Yeah.
an option. But
right.
if you had a 4th table on a different subject or,
Right.
then you.
You just
you make
expand it out.
You've expanded it and made that group smaller by default, by
Right.
taking some from each of the other groups.
Oh, I think the 3 times 2 is the route to go.
3 times 2, so 2 Route 4 tables, 2
Yeah.
downtown tables, 2 village tables.
Yeah,
Yep.
And you play it by ear, you prepare for that amount of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
But if that amount of people don't show up, you consolidate and you just.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if each of the tables for a specific group come up with totally different
Yeah.
visions.
Right,
I think that would be an interesting,
but you don't want a group of more than 8, I don't think. The 10-minute
Yeah.
period, and more than 8, nobody's gonna be able to get there.
well, does it have to be 10 minutes with 3? I mean, you could do.
Well, no,
You could do 15 or
you could
even
do
20
15 if you were doing 3,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the RPC and the planning board member who's at each table, they're gonna be the scribes.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, they'll kind of facilitate, maybe kind of ask more questions to kind of get more
Yeah.
information, kind of ask those posing questions, and then also a note taker or scribe, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things maybe we'll try to do too is as people, in a time thing too, if someone needs to leave but wants to like jot something down, on a section of the paper, on section of the table, we'll have like a large, or maybe on the wall next to it, depending, maybe a big post-it
Mhm.
note, right? And just
Right on.
have them be able to write. Some people, maybe they don't want to speak up at the time, but they want to jot their note down. And so we'll have a collection for that too, where they can write it down.
Yep.
And then also have the note taker. Another thought I had about, as you guys were talking about the tables and kind of, the Route 4, the Enfield Village, and the downtown are your core. do you wanna, you know, and maybe we do this as a, if there's more people, do we kind of pull and do, okay, some others was businesses. Maybe we do an area focused on businesses. Are there certain, you know, information you wanna gather with
Yeah.
that? Yeah,
Types and uses.
yeah,
In
right.
business.
Like what, you know, are there things that you'd like to see? How do we, you know, create that draw for that? Is there a draw for this? Is there not? So business and residential was kind of the two that popped in my head as you guys were talking too.
Well, of course, you could,
Can we focus?
in the downtown and the Route 4 district, you could have that as part of the discussion. I think
Yep.
it would naturally have to be.
Yeah, right. It would naturally. I'm just wondering if there's a more broader, you know, do we just do a bigger, broader, throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks table if we needed to on just overall arching, or maybe, I don't know, is what other topics have come up in this? You know, when we were talking, one of the things too, I was taxes. Right? Do people have questions on tax income? What are maybe hindrances? Why would someone be reserved to talk about or change these? What are reservations?
Linda.
Yeah.
That's already got too.
Linda,
Yes. I wouldn't like to see a discussion about asking people what they'd like for businesses. We've been doing this since we started the Main Street project. So we have 20+ years of asking people what they want. The market drives what happens. And because they want a dry cleaner and because they want a print shop, we had services for both of those. They couldn't make it go in Enfield. So I think your time would be better used not asking them what kind of businesses they'd like, because Trader Joe's will come up and we already know that they,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
I mean, we've really been around this block quite a bit, and I don't think it moves this particular project forward because we're talking about zoning changes, not
Yeah.
what they'd like to see for stores.
Yeah, because during the master planning process, I remember a very vivid conversation with somebody where they were adamantly opposed to any and all box stores. So I said, what should we have? We should have a market basket, which is exactly what they described they did not want.
right,
In terms of the structure, you know, parking lot with a big square steel building. You know, so it's just one of the, like, I think Linda's right, we've been through all of that. This is zoning specific. What should we allow? What should we not allow?
Well, I think the question about businesses that we're gonna have to nail down at some point is, what kinds of businesses are not appropriate for the downtown? Not so much.
Right.
That question is not so much
What?
before, but.
Yeah.
Right. It's a different area. What kind of businesses just wouldn't be appropriate there?
That could be one of the questions that gets asked in each of the groups.
Anything that requires parking.
pretty much.
Well,
Not to be snide, but.
well, here's the thing though, what businesses, does an ice cream stand require parking, or is the fact that I can walk there mean it's a business that doesn't require parking? So I mean, you're correct, parking is a challenge. But I think that like, things like that are really, it really depends on where you live, whether or not you think the business requires parking. That's more of a housing question, actually. But I think discussions of mixed use and stuff are, because ZBA had something last night because mixed use wasn't allowed.
Right.
So I wonder, since this kind of came out of the master plan, if we take quotes from the master plan and say, how does this feel with you guys? Do you think we're addressing the want to keep the historical nature of downtown? Do you think that would be a good way to facilitate?
I think we need specific
Okay.
zoning rules discussion of how do you accomplish that?
Yeah.
Not do people want to have that happen because they've said they want to have that happen. We already know that's what they want to have happen. We don't need to re-ask that question. It's how do we make that?
How do we make it happen?
This is the
How do
how,
we make it happen?
not the what.
Right.
So if we, just going back to the flow, we had talked about, okay, we're gonna be at part 2 around 10 o'clock.
Yep.
The Regional Planning Commission staff is gonna do maybe a 5 to 10 minute overview, it sounds like, of the keys to the valley. And some of the, the graphics and things like that to set the stage. Then we're gonna do visioning. We're gonna have 3 stations.
Yep.
Possibly 6 tables, two, 3 stations times 2 tables potentially, depending on the size of the crowd. We're gonna prepare for that. We're gonna have 3 stations. By the time we start the first discussion at the first station with people, it'll be about 10:15. If each of those discussions, people rotate 3 times, if each of those discussions is 20 minutes based on a set of facilitated questions that are getting to what we've just been talking about, the key points that we want to drill down on in each of those areas over a 20-minute period with a table of 8 people. That puts us, and you got a couple of minutes of rotating between, each station. That's, let's say, plus or minus an hour.
Mhm.
That puts us at about 11:15, maybe 11:20 after, including rotation time, by the time we're done that third discussion. At that point, are we then going table by table to hear a summary from each of the facilitators about what was heard? So the full group hears, a little summary of the discussion. That would be the kind of standard.
Yeah,
So maybe a couple minutes at each table for each facilitator to say, here's what I heard over the course of the morning. That brings you to probably,
11:30.
11:35,
Yeah.
maybe close.
maybe even quarter.
Maybe, 11:40.
Yeah.
Then do we close with next steps? Like, this process isn't finished, we're doing X, Y, and Z over the coming months and, preparing taking what we heard today and, beginning to, craft a draft ordinance over the next few months. And here's what we're looking at for a schedule. And, here's what you can expect to see over the summer and fall. And, the conversation isn't over, but we're taking all the, the feedback that we got today and kind of, 5 to 10 minutes of next steps. That puts us at about close to noon.
And we'll be back to see
That
you
would
again.
roughly
Sounds right.
be the flow
Yeah.
of the morning. Is that, am I missing something there, or is
No.
that
You
real?
nailed it.
If you've got anything else, send them to us.
Yeah, because we're not gonna, there won't really be no decision to
No.
get made and.
Oh, no.
It's summarizing feedback and.
Well, Eric has,
Well, my question, no, I think you summarized the day very, very well. Is when people are at the tables, do we want them to try to fill out an example template? A zoning template, to really focus on, these are the things we're talking about,
Well,
uses, lot size.
or we ask them prompt questions and we fill those out.
Well, yeah, yes, but I guess that's what I'm getting at, is do we want the work product of each people at the table to be, here's a template that was filled out, and that also makes summarizing it very easy. This group thought X, Y, Z, this group said, ABC to the same questions. But it also keeps you focused and it forces, right, building height. Big thing people were talking about in town for a long time. You can't say, do you want tall buildings or short buildings?
Right.
That's not valuable.
Yeah.
It's,
But
you want,
you can say 2-story or 4-story.
even that's not valuable. Because, right, we have, a concept in town at the moment that's a 2-story building, but it exceeds our height
Right.
limitation.
Mhm.
So it's really the number of feet is the important thing.
Mhm.
That's the only time when you actually create a limit on somebody.
and I will,
And
that
that's,
specific example, I
Right.
will summarize the building
Yeah,
survey
right.
we did, right? And so
think
that question can be on the table.
right, but I think it's important to make them pick a number,
Pick a number. yeah.
to give true feedback, say, well, I'd like 2-story tall buildings. Okay, well, if it's, but I also want sloped roofs. Well, if you build a 30-foot wide barn with a sloped roof, you're more than 30 feet tall.
Right.
If it's 2 stories. Right, so you can't fit that architecture into a
What you're
30,
saying.
into what you're saying, right? So you get the conflicts come out if you sort of force specifics onto them. Because I think you're right. I think there's gonna be a lot of, 2 stories or 3 stories or 1 story type discussions, but until you get into how tall that actually is, you aren't talking about a height limit.
Or is that? Or is that a discussion that we have at a second forum? Where we've taken the information gathered at this one, we've drafted an ordinance, we've actually proposed a building height in the draft. And then we have some kind of presentation where we lay it all out there and then we split up in tables and talk about it again.
Or I'm wondering if we could have an example of like a picture of a building in town that's 2 stories or 3 stories, and then what that footage is, because saying 30 feet, I don't think would resonate with us.
I use that as an example specifically, because it was a big case of the ZBA, and Tim actually did a very nice summary of sort of existing heights in town. So that's an example we have our head wrapped around. But it's also a clear example of like tall versus short means very different things. But, so does, lot size means very different things to different people. Somebody who grew up in different places are gonna have very different feelings around that, parking is gonna be something people have different feelings about, but unless you say you have to have 4 spaces per unit versus 1 space per unit, you're not really talking about parking until you talk about the specifics of how many parking spaces do people have to have, like the actual number.
I don't know, Eric, I just feel like people are gonna get
too bogged down.
They get bogged down.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I think that's fair.
At this forum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think.
I think that's fair.
we got in the weeds on parking
Yeah.
for months.
Sharon?
I think if you're gonna bring people in and ask their opinion, the 2 biggest issues I see for Enfield in the future for development that's really gonna impact all of us are parking and height. Because what people don't understand, if they're thinking of a building next to them, they're thinking of the size of, Eric, a 2-story building.
Right.
They're not thinking that 2-story building is gonna have a garage underneath of it, and it's gonna be multiple units next to each other. And so I think it has to be addressed, because
Yeah, but-
people, so to wait, to say, let's gather people, let's just deal with this and ignore it. It's gonna be a problem, and it's really, to me, is what is gonna change the rural character of Enfield the most. We will look like Lebanon if we're not careful. Lots of tall buildings all over the place. There's nothing rural about that, and they all look like boxes. Yeah, and parking. I'm appalled that people are building units with 1 parking lot. It was proposed the other night that you're spending oodles of money for a 1-bedroom apartment that chances are 2 people are gonna live in, and only one of you can park your car on the site, and the other of you has to pay to find someplace in town that somebody will rent a spot to on top of what you're paying for rent. That's not quality of life. And what I really want is I want good development in Enfield, no matter what it is, that people come and stay here and become a contributing part of our community. That's the only way we're gonna survive. I mean, we're a bedroom community as it is. But a lot of the good things that happen in Enfield happen because of the families that have lived here for generations and really enjoyed the quality of life here. And that's what I think we have to not throw out the window as, people are trying to maximize space and dollars. So,
Well, I think we could have the building height survey, the copy of that could be on, and the facilitator is gonna be very familiar with it.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So it's there. You can have that discussion about heights and bounce it off of because survey shows you all those buildings in town and what their heights are. And just throwing this out there, 2.5 stories is the predominant size building in town. 2.5. That's, you see those everywhere. And so, we can just talk in general and how the 35 feet existing ordinance doesn't allow most of those to have been built. And maybe have a discussion about what do you think that height ought to be?
Right.
Just,
I think we need to, my view is we need to, because I think it's those specifics that really, and the conflicts between, you know, if we want 2.5-story buildings that look like the ones we have, you have to have a height limit that allows that to be built.
Yeah. I just, so we're gonna have 20 minutes at
Yeah,
each table. If we've got 8 people at a table and 20 minutes to talk to them about a particular part of our polygon, realistically, that we can do 4, maybe 5 questions if we're lucky
yeah.
in that 20 minutes. What should those questions be? I jotted down some notes based on the key themes that I've heard, you know, today. Uses is one. Should happen.
so this homework you guys asked us to put together, what I did is I took all of the uses I could think of. And I got this thing here, you got village, downtown, Route 4. Now, this use, yes, no, yes, in each of the sections. I hope at the end of this thing, we can fill this out, not necessarily at the table, but that we'll get enough information to know what to put in these blocks.
But that's the kind of thing you could have each person fill out while you're having a discussion at the table.
Well, this is 5 pages long, unfortunately.
No, but that's okay. But by the end, they would have something they could hand in, and then you'd have, you know, 30 different.
So that's the use part.
So something on uses in that 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Whether that's they fill out a form or whether we ask it, we have a scribe, however we structure that. One of those 5 things that we're gonna talk about in that 20 minutes is uses. I would suggest we also talk about density or hear feedback about density, dimensions. So that's where height and some, you know, dimensional factors come in. Aesthetics,
That one's a tough one.
it's a tough one, but you know, there's historic considerations and, you know, part of this, there's, you know. We hear about aesthetics a lot. People care about what things look like. They care a lot about what things look like. And then potentially parking could be a 5th. That's 5 big topic areas that will repeatedly come up. I don't know that we, you know, it's just that off the top of my head, if we only have time, 20 minutes with 8 people to talk about 4 or 5 things, those seem to be the things that come up the most consistently.
I would drop the parking.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
and parking's an interesting one too, because the very first thing that every facilitator should say is the state law.
Right.
Which is you can't require, was it more than one? You can't require by state law more than one.
One unit,
One
one per
car-
unit,
one per unit.
one per
So
unit.
the only real question there is, should we allow less than one per? unit?
Less,
Right,
yeah.
Right.
more than one is.
We have a parking maximum instead of a parking minimum.
No,
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 You can't.
right, should we only require, because you can't say, we can't have zoning that says 2
You
parking
have to have
spaces
2 per unit. You cannot
You
do
can't
that.
do that,
The law says you can only have,
right,
the max is 1.
so some of these
Right.
conversations,
don't
Right.
even bring up the topic.
No, you don't have to.
Don't even bring up the topic.
but what I'm getting at, some of these topics, we have to make sure we're comfortable framing them within the state law.
Right.
yeah,
Because some of the things that, you know, we all might like, can't do it.
Yeah, I would just leave parking lot, say, don't even bring the discussion up. If someone asks, saying it's market driven and state law says, we can't require it. So we just say it's
One
market
per
driven.
unit.
It's
Right.
market driven.
yeah, because we'll repeat that
Right.
whole parking conversation about the downtown business district and then we'll get no.
we'll get nowhere,
Yeah.
exactly.
So take parking out, then you got 4 things to cover, 5 minutes each in 20 minutes. Uses, density, dimensions, and aesthetics. It's your big items. Yeah.
On your,
As far as the aesthetics, does that get, like, Rob, does that run into like what they ran into with, out on Route 4? We got too specific and nobody wanted to go out there and build anything.
Well,
Look at it kind
you got some handouts, some visuals to guide that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my posing question to you all on aesthetics is, like, you're not talking form-based zoning.
No,
You're not talking like you have to have this style and stay with this architecture. It's more the aesthetics of,
What do people want it to look like? Yeah.
But-
The difference, it's the difference between the village district and the Route 4 district.
okay, so like, what do they want it to look like as far as maybe like how the density kind of, right? Like, is the lot sizes are gonna determine also what it looks
Right.
like, right? So that's aesthetic in a way, even though you don't think it is, because if you need so much frontage,
Right.
dimensional controls will influence the aesthetic. But if we're talking like what siding they have on their building, we
no,
can't, no,
no.
it's not like that aesthetic. It's,
Maybe just a free form discussion.
okay, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
jot some notes
Yeah.
down.
I'm just gonna,
Linda,
So I want to bring up one thing about parking. A few months ago, I mentioned that it would be nice if the town of Enfield, with any little lot that it controls, even if it's only one parking place, if they could get identified, leveled out, and a sign put there, it's at least a step in the right direction, even if we only come up with half a dozen more parking places. So.
Yeah.
Let me ask our selectmen, is there any way for like Julie to identify those and for Jim Taylor to see if it's possible to do something like that?
Yeah, so I'll ask Rob to send you the parking report that was presented to the select board in February, I think
Yeah,
it was, which goes through the whole downtown and identifies all of the town-owned properties in downtown and the parking availability. And I think you missed the meeting, but it's kind of a standard. There's actually 200 town-owned parking spaces in downtown Enfield.
Great.
Yeah,
and went into doing signage.
Yeah, no, but, and so, yeah, so the select board's talking about how do we communicate to people that we have parking? And then also relooking at some of our parking rules, should we allow some overnight parking in a few spots, things like that.
and pretty much what you just said, I think we could put in your and my presentation.
Yep.
To suggest that folks today during this forum, don't get hung up on this issue, because it's well understood. And we are making movement to
Right.
try to address it. But we want to hear more about what you want for uses in this area.
Mhm.
You know, so that we don't spend half the meeting time talking about parking.
Tim, could we get back to your 5-page form for just a second? I think it's a great idea, and I'm wondering how the rest of the group feels about adapting this and putting it on the website. Either as an after the forum exercise or just as an additional information gathering.
You mean like, we take we fill one out based on all we learned Saturday and put that on?
No. We have a blank form
Oh,
on the website, which is,
is it like a questionnaire?
yeah, which is similar to this,
Little
that
survey.
people can check boxes and say, yeah, I like this use in downtown business, but not in the Route 4. And just go through, all of these uses that you've identified. Is that something that people would feel would be helpful? And if so, is that something that can be easily accomplished by RPC staff?
we had to.
Because we did talk
Right.
about a web-based survey at some point,
Yeah.
and maybe this is it.
Um,
Some kind of interactive form you'd have to have, and
Louder,
I'd have
please.
to see the form to see how we
It's
can
coming,
set it up.
Coming
Yeah,
around.
when it comes to,
it's coming in.
I'm trying to think.
we might wanna cut some of those out of there.
Thank you.
We might, yeah. I'm just looking at the whole
Right,
concept
the
of
whole
it.
concept I like, yeah.
ArcGIS survey.
Or.
Firearm ranges, it's gonna get a no from all three.
Well, but
You're
it's good to
kidding.
see that,
Yeah.
though. It's good to see you got no.
We saved
Right.
that for R1, don't we?
Yes, we only have it in R1. And you can't stop it.
I know.
GIS.
Well, that list was meant for the entire.
Oh, I know.
town. It's not.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Still.
Yeah, yeah, I think we could turn this into a survey and collect that data. So you would want it, you'd want it after the forum that people can be like, hey, after we talk about this, think about it.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah,
you
Yeah.
know, go back to the master plan website. There's a link up there to
Yeah.
take the survey.
To do a survey monkey.
Yeah.
yeah.
We could probably have a. Yeah, we can create that, and have a QR code too, and that way it can be there. As people walk out, they can snap it if they want to do that, or they can go to the master plan website
Well,
and take it.
feel free to organize that in any fashion.
Okay.
You wish. And you may
Okay.
have land uses.
Sure, we can add some, yeah, we could take a look at it. Yeah,
You can send that to us, right?
I think, was that one of the ones that you
No.
did? No, okay. Chairman Price had seen that. Maybe it was just the list, but.
Jim, on your building height study, did you have photos? I don't remember.
I did.
Okay, because that, I'm just, like, when we're talking about 2-story, 2.5-story, it's arbitrary.
Yep.
You know, everybody has a different thing in their mind when they hear that.
Right.
So if you do, this building is this height,
Right.
are you okay with that next to you?
If somebody wanted to build another Whitney Hall today.
Yeah.
Our zoning does not allow
Yeah,
that.
or a Copeland block, or,
Well, no, or Victorians on Shaker Hill Road
Right, yeah.
right,
are
But-
above
but
the
then-
35
right.
feet.
but then when you get into aesthetics, it becomes into, you wanna see a box building with a flat roof? That's 40 feet high, or do you wanna see a 2-story with a pitch roof attic? That's
Still 40 feet high.
That's 45 feet high,
Right.
Mhm.
you know, that's
Right.
5 feet higher, but it looks very different.
Right. Yep.
One idea to that, that Anna had when we were chatting at our internal team meeting was, she had seen like, yeah, what's called a heat map of
Mhm.
properties that exist today.
But are non-compliant to the zoning, so they could not be made today.
And so,
And this was in New London, and basically most of the map was lit up,
Oh,
with
yeah.
non-compliant, so.
Yeah.
And also having pictures of, like, the Victorian, homes that are, wouldn't be allowed, having pictures of that is also helpful for people to see, like, oh, this is what my community already looks like. Not much is changing, cause I think the fear is what is like, drives a lot of, opposition.
Yeah, so it's like there's a photo. Of the
Yeah,
Copeland block.
yeah.
Guess what the saw height of that is? 36 feet. You'd think that thing was giant, but it's not.
No.
36 feet from, that's from Main Street.
From the sidewalk.
yeah.
Side.
It's in-
Yeah,
But you can't build it.
1 foot too tall.
Yep.
right. Right.
But that's a beautiful building.
I was just reading it just sort of reminded me when I was reading the commercial uses, the firearm ranges, that thing that was being proposed in Canaan, up on Main Street. It was a little bit more than a firearm range.
Yeah.
If there are other things too, survey wise, that
It was a fully automatic.
you think of, or that anyone else thinks of for an after follow-up, let us know in the next week or so, and we'll try to make sure we can include that with the uses too.
Have we come to a,
Have we come to, an end?
I think a pretty
I
good
think so.
summary of the layout of the day.
Yeah.
I guess just kind of one question, I don't wanna go down this too much information gathering for this piece of specific information, if you all don't feel it's needed, but I guess is there questions, or do you feel like would come up with, more housing, more school-age children? What does that do? Tax burden, that side of things? Have you heard any of that sentiments? Do you think that will come up? Because, some of the information that could be is, as those infill happens, what assessed value does that bring now to the town, right? And do we show a summary? So like for that Chester and Wilder, Vermont idea, right? Like those homes there would bring X amount of assessed value potentially to the tax. So that was just a thought that I had. I wasn't sure if it had come up or not. And before diving into or researching more.
So for the schools, it's pretty easy. People at the school board and administration have made it very clear and will most likely make another statement about how the schools have plenty of capacity.
underutilized?
Yeah, they're currently,
Yeah, I mean, you have those
Nobody's
you just
concerned
have those
about-
numbers available saying
right,
current population, school population,
the building can handle.
capacity population, without adding any new teachers would be X.
Well, we've been removing teachers actively the last 5 years, so.
Yeah.
Also, well, not also, but another.
Yeah.
Point I think on that is that, absent a development that may happen slightly outside our village area. What we're talking about here really is an area of town that will hopefully grow at a pace that you almost won't notice.
Mhm.
Right.
The impacts are gradual.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's not overnight.
Yeah.
The build out.
Yeah.
My God, we're talking 20, 25 or more years.
Mhm.
For folks who have large lots who finally die and sell, and then the new owner wants to divide it up, and the previous owner, no way would even consider it.
Mhm.
It just takes forever.
So I'm wondering if kind of like the parking lot or the parking issue is kind of setting in the beginning, being like, you may have concerns about school, or we can just throw that aside and just kind of pretend there are no barriers. Do you think that would be a helpful frame to
We
start?
can have clear data on the school, the school will provide a statement saying
Mhm.
Yeah.
that there's plenty of capacity, the schools are able to utilize, because every
Yeah.
time, they've been asked multiple times over the years, and that's always been the answer.
And I think that could.
180 fewer students in the district over the last 12 years.
Okay, there we go.
Water and sewer capacity for a gradual build out over 20, 25 years, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
We could double our sewer usage tomorrow and we still have capacity.
Yes.
How about the water capacity
The
issue?
water capacity that's real. Slow build out will be fine. A very large build out quickly will have to find their own water.
Sharon had a question.
Schools. I spoke with the principal at the Enfield Elementary School about a year ago and asked kind of what would happen. She said the problem with the Enfield Elementary School, they do have current space. They have space for about 40 more kids.
Right.
So that's 2 more classes.
Mhm.
So it depends on the age of the kids and how they could fit them into the current classes. They said if there were more than 40 kids, the problem with that building is they can't go up. Because there's some regulation about ages of children and how many floors up they can be or something of that nature. So I mean, the one thing that's in here that really shocked me, and I'm trying to find the page, is the number of units that was supposed that Enfield could have to be built out was what, 1,200?
Mhm.
More
it's a big
units?
number.
There's
So large.
more than 40 kids. In
Yeah.
those 1,200 units, I would
Oh, yeah.
suggest.
But that's a theoretical, over many, many years type of build out.
That's over the entire town.
Right, over the entire town. And I think, if the kind of growth that we're hoping happens over a long period of time, at some point, you know, maybe the entire district is gonna reconfigure and move another grade up to the middle school. Or, you know, they can put a extension on EVS for 2 more classrooms, or
We don't even, you don't even get into that.
we don't wanna talk about
If
that.
some of the bills that are in the House right now pass, there'll be open enrollment in every town.
That's right, we can send all our kids to Hanover.
I think, and I think to the point, like you know, that big number and in part of our presentation of the regional housing needs assessment and kind of that projection number, is one, it is over a time span. It is for the entire town of Enfield. And, you know, there are some things that are taken into consideration and some that are not in that. So it's kind of a, you know, a little bit of a gelling number, not firm. And, you know, the thing too with families is, you know, hopefully also like it's not, the number today isn't gonna stay the same. Everyone's changing and rotating, right? And graduating up. And so hopefully it'll all kind of, the cadence will be there. It's not gonna, yeah, you know, the worst case scenario, you don't need 50 new first graders per se, right? Because then that's where you have the issue, but it's the steps. And I think another key to that too, which the RHNA does break out and we would highlight is the types of units. So there's owner occupied and also rentals, right? And so sometimes your smaller rentals, 1 to 2 bedroom rentals aren't often going to be families. Maybe it's the younger, you know, starting families, or people downsizing and things like that. So it's kind of that whole highlighting as well that it's, you know, not 1,200 single family homes, but a mixture and what that brings and the dynamic and vibrancy that it brings to the community. So, yeah.
My last question, and thank you for your forbearance this evening. Should there be some list somewhere of the things that you really have no control over? Such as you talked about the 1 car, you know, I wasn't aware that that was a state law. Thank you for that. That was good information. So in a sense, if at each table, there was a sheet of, these are the things we can't control.
Can't touch.
Because even when we're talking about what type of house would you like?
Right.
I've sat in meetings and heard people say that you can't control what a developer, if it's within the regulations, you can't control the style of house. the
Right.
developer
Right.
puts in.
Right.
So to even ask people, what type of house would you like? I think I'd like to have pie in the sky vision, but then I get frustrated because it's, why did you ask me what my vision was if it can't happen? So I think that would be helpful.
Oh, I got back to the previous, discussion there on your thing here, and I'm familiar with the study, the Keys to the Valley and the whole Upper Valley housing needs assessments. And I'm assuming that, and they listed Enfield as 200 units. And I think they use like a 10-year time span.
We'll highlight that. Yep.
It just,
Do that.
you're gonna, someone sees this
Right.
and they're gonna go like, no way.
What that means, what is it?
Well, one is they're gonna say,
Mhm.
no way do we want 200 housing units
Mhm.
in the next 10 years in Enfield.
Mhm.
And then I personally seriously question the methodology that was used in that study and plus multiple other studies that I have read from other, Maine did one, Vermont did one.
Mhm.
So, I just think the numbers are a bit fudged.
Okay.
I mean, the math is fine, it's just what they use for as I'm not a statistician, and I don't, but, the baseline data, the assumptions that they made that come up with their final number,
Mhm.
I always questioned. There's a lot of what I was reading when I finally was able to find how they calculated those numbers was single person should be able to afford a home by themselves. One person, not 2 people, one working person should be able to earn enough wage to buy a house.
Well, this 200 doesn't represent
I mean-
200
No,
individuals.
that's how they.
N-
And
Not
how they fix it.
ownership, not
Yeah,
ownership.
it's the formula they use, but anyway, I just
200
question,
housing Units, it's not
can't-
200 homes. A lot of those are apartments.
no,
That's
no,
not,
no, in the studies they talk about.
well, they may, but.
Yeah,
but
no,
this
that's-
is
but that's, but anyways, I just
We have to go with it.
be able to,
We have to go with it.
yeah, I'm just saying
We
this,
don't have a better number
And I think,
and we can't fake it.
mhm. I think that the highlights too that we'll bring, and I think will be helpful, I hope will be helpful, is, the RHNA does break out rentals, ownership, projection numbers, as well as, as two different categories, as well as, 60% of AMI, 100% of AMI,
Mhm.
and what that means a little bit. And I think we'll utilize more visual kind of numbers than AMIs and build technical terms, again, area
I
meaning.
mean, I just think,
I think
just
it's-
having
it's
that number
broken out.
there, if someone from the general public sees it, they're gonna be in a panic mode.
I said the same
Numbers.
thing when we had the three of us together. I said, I don't even wanna see that number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that number,
Numbers.
that number opens
Right.
up a can of worms that has nothing to do with this forum.
Right,
I think it
they
has
say,
everything to do with this form, and I think that number needs to be there. It is an attempt for the Regional Planning Commission to tell the towns in the area that you should use this as a goal. And Lebanon has a number, and
Mhm.
Hanover has a number, White River and so forth, and maybe you could bring up what those numbers are.
Mhm.
We're just a small piece of this, but
Oh, I know.
no, but this is
can't-
Enfield's portion.
yeah, I know, but
So that's-
we can't just isolate ourselves and say
Right.
we're only gonna build 50 units in the next
No,
20 years.
but we can't dictate how many units are going to be built.
Well, no,
Oh, no,
But,
yeah.
So I would just leave that off and
We
say,
built 12.
just say
last
there's a
year.
housing shortage, in countrywide. And we're trying to, Enfield's needs to increase its attract new residents.
Right.
And this is the way we can do it, and just leave it at that. Don't put a number on it. Just say, and to promote housing and new residents to be able to move to and live in Enfield. We need to-
Affordably.
To an affordable level. We need housing, and this is how we propose to do it.
And I think that one thing I'll say on that real quick is just that the RHNA data, the numbers, I always do preface and try to say, at any of my presentations on it is, it's a goal number, it's a projection. It doesn't take into consideration what we're behind in creating as well. And so that's daunting sometimes, but the thing is not to get stuck on the number per se. It's there as a goal, there as a planning tool. And it's, also like to be proactive in how do you want to plan your town? And I think that's what the basis of this forum is too, right? How do we want to, we know these things are issues, we know these things have come up through the master plan. We have supporting documentation from the master plan, quotes from pages, why we're doing this, the catalyst for it all. And you are being proactive and forward and trying to plan. And I think that's the end goal. And we know that the town's gonna grow. We don't, to your point, we don't know how much, we don't know for sure how many will be built or how it'll be built. But planning and zoning is a tool to utilize to make it happen and how it happens.
I'm just afraid
Yeah.
that
And explaining
having
that.
a 200 housing unit number that people from the general public see,
Yeah. it's
they're
not-
gonna just focus on that.
Yep.
Say, no way. Especially when you only talk, equate that 200 to the village area.
No.
I think they
The
would.
entire town.
I know that, but the people, the general public,
We're gonna
Not
tell
gonna-
them what that means.
right.
At 12 per year, that puts us at
Back in the
between
weeds.
10 and,
Yeah,
Yeah,
between 15
Back
and
in the
20
weeds.
years to be on target for that.
but I'm just saying what perception will be. Not what the
I
reality is,
agree,
what the perception is.
I agree. But it's not gonna get us, it's not gonna change anything.
Town of Enfield has what, 1,900 to 2,000 units in total, so basically what that number is saying we're 10% short on the amount of housing that we should have right now.
Is it 12 a year? That's,
And,
18 years?
And anyway, that's.
and our census has gone down.
Right, well, I'm just saying, I'm just afraid that that would be people would focus on that, and that's what they would spend 10 minutes discussing, not the other stuff.
Well, it'll be the facilitator's job at each table to say, we're not gonna talk about this.
Guided direct.
That's what facilitators do.
Different direction.
Okay, it's 25 minutes before 9, so we're 5 minutes over our scheduled time. Anybody have any new business they wish to discuss? Anybody have any? Hey,
There are some bills that are going to be making their way across to the House shortly that are very significant and in some cases head scratching, in my view.
yes,
I think everybody should keep an eye on Senate Bill 84. Senate Bill 84 would basically set a lot size of 2 acres for every place in the state of New Hampshire that is not served by water and sewer.
Right.
Like a recipe for rural sprawl.
Yeah.
And you know, some of these things that are, you know, intended to deal with the housing shortage, the pendulum is swinging so far in one direction from a state that used to kind of leave it to towns to determine local control. Senate Bill 84 would be a major change in how all land use and zoning in the state of New Hampshire occurs and would affect us and everybody else. It's worth keeping an eye on.
when that crosses over to the House, where is it going?
I don't know.
It's not municipal and county, I can tell you that.
And it seems to be well supported.
Yeah,
It made it through the Senate.
well, it's well supported because 60 to 70% of the legislators are south of Concord, where 2 acres for them is a lot of
It's a lot
land.
of land.
Yeah.
As somebody who grew up on a 1/4 acre in Concord, I didn't think that was a small lot.
Anyway, I
Okay.
just note that as something that's worth
Oh, yeah.
keeping an eye on.
Oh, yeah,
Good point.
the one that says if more than 50% of the lots around you are this size, then you can't say you've gotta have R3 if everybody else around you is 1/4 acre,
Right,
i.e. Crystal Lake.
yeah. Although that, all right, the follow-up on that is that the next layer out has to have planning board approval.
Right,
So what?
right,
Makes no sense.
makes no sense.
Renee,
I think unless they amended it, Nate, that 2 acre, it has to be in the majority of the town. So
Right.
50% of the town, but it's not the entire town. You could still have areas, so.
There was an amendment on March 20th.
Oh, was
I don't know exactly.
Okay.
That's interesting for Enfield, because we have a third of our town is in conservation
Right,
by land area. Either,
Oh, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's good. So that could be in the 49%. So you only have to allow the 2 acre, their 2 acre in the majority of your town, which is 51% of your town. So
Right.
if you take into consideration your downtown where you allow a lot less, what percentage ends up needing to flow into that 2 acre minimum or 2 acre maximum? The rest of your town, the 49% can remain larger than the 2 acre min.
Then you might be able to
Yeah.
weave in cluster requirements for large lots. Yes, they can be under 2 acres and under, but they have to be clustered in I would think.
okay, our next meeting, unless Sharon, do you have any more comments? Okay, you've come up with some very good suggestions today, so I thank you for that.
will be the Wednesday before forum.
Oh, wow, You're right.
I know.
Uh, our next meeting will be April 23rd, which is the Wednesday before our forum. I know we've got Eric's site plan and maybe some other stuff.
Hmm.
So I would count on it being potentially a long meeting. Because I think we are gonna have a lot of details we wanna go over, and it might be helpful if those of us that are giving the 5 to 10 minute speeches used it as an opportunity to stand up in front of the whiteboard and practice in front of a small friendly group.
Not a bad idea.
That's all I gotta say.
Yep.
Somebody wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Linda, how do you vote?
Aye.
Good. Eric,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
David says aye. We don't have any alternates. Meeting is adjourned at 8:41.